أهلا وسهلا بكم في هذه الحلقة الجديدة من حوار خاص، وضيفتي اليوم ضيفة خاصة جدا، إنها لورين بوث التي اعتنقت الإسلام مؤخرا بعد رحلة طويلة قربتها من القضايا العربية والإسلامية. إسلامها أحدث ردات فعل كثيرة في الإعلام البريطاني، من السخرية إلى الغضب إلى قليل من الترحيب في بعض الأوساط. ويسعدني أن تكون معنا هذا اليوم لورين بوث حتى نسألها عن هذه الرحلة التي انتهت بها إلى حضن الإسلام. Lauren, you're most welcome to the program.
Thank you.
Now, what I've just said in the introduction is that you've taken a journey to Islam, and that journey started with getting closer to Arab and Islamic issues. You've been involved in supporting the Palestinian cause, in opposing the war in Iraq. You've had your share of appearances on various TV channels. And I'm not here only talking about Press TV and Islam channel, but also some of the mainstream British channels. And you've had also your columns and your writings in the various newspapers. However, what I would like you to tell us today is about this journey. How did you end up there? These things don't happen overnight. Usually it's a process. So how did this process start, and what sort of stages it went through?
I think perhaps if we start at the end and then go back to the beginning, because when I reverted to Islam, I didn't realize I was on a path that Allah was guiding me to. Believe you me, there was nobody more surprised than me when I took Shahada. So we start at the end with a visit to Iran, a spiritual experience, if you will, in a shrine there, and then having to look back and wondering how long had I been on this path myself. So this is a question that I've been asking.
Now, because you've written about this experience, this spiritual experience you had in Iran, some people speculated that you probably converted to the Shia denomination of Islam. Is this true?
Do you know, it's really good to begin with this question, and I'm glad you've asked it, because I feel that as long as I'm saying La ilaha illallah, that I'm a Muslim, and I hope that my brothers and sisters in Islam will accept that. And I reverted, for the record, in London after an experience in what I only knew was a mosque and a shrine. So I didn't go in there thinking Shia or Sunni. I didn't go in there, I just knew, I just said the word, Allah a few times. So that's my connection to Islam, and I hope the brothers and sisters will accept that that's the road that I'm beginning on. And
so you made the Shahada after you returned here in London?
Yes, not in Iran, over here. And I respect all makes and modes of Muslims, because they're all, showing me so much love. So my journey that I didn't know I was on. Islam is painted so aggressively now in the West that no one, that we place ourselves in the West via the media and our politicians as righteous, as conquerors over something that is violent in its texture and aggressive. And our politicians have to give explanations as to why we conquer these people and we take these lands. So we are painted in the West, non-Muslims, as the vanquishers of something evil. Now, when you go, as I did, to Palestine, and you see the immense evil that's been done by Zionism on the Palestinian people with the backing of the British government and the EU, and of course America, bombs and bullets, then you have to think, well, if we non-Muslims are not the side of good, could this be the side of good? Could these people be the righteous ones? And suddenly, it's as if there's a book in English called Alice Through the Looking Glass. And it's a girl's adventure as she goes through the same room, but it's entirely different. And the world is turned upside down. And honestly, the first checkpoint I went through in Palestine was the moment I went through the looking glass. And I think
And that was roughly about 5-6 years ago?
Only 2005, and it feels like my whole life. The strange thing is, it's like all the life before has dropped away, and become so involved and so blessed with this subject and topic. So there was that. There was the we're not good, these people aren't bad. Let's explore that moment. And then I really think just spending time in Palestinian homes and seeing and being asked to pray. There are certain things that need to be ticked off on a voyage to Islam. The first is take away the fear of the people of Islam. The second is to spend a time at a home and see how relaxed the homes are of people, in this case for me, Palestinians. And the third very important one is the first time you go into a masjid and you watch people pray and you see that it's not strange and it's not people renting their hair or setting fire to the American flag or saying things that are hateful. It's a very peaceful and natural supplication to God. And I think once all those things happen, you're on a path.
Were you religious at all before? I mean, were you practicing Christianity?
I can't say I was practicing Christianity because I don't know that people do practice it anymore in any meaningful way, but I would always pray to God in times of hardship, and I would always thank one true God in times of happiness. So there was always a connection and a belief there.
Now, in the internet, there are all sorts of things mentioned about your background and your family, etc. If you could set the record straight, I mean, we're told you grew up as a Catholic, but your mother was Jewish. You are half sister of Sherry Blair, the wife of Tony Blair, former Prime Minister of Britain. What is your family background, if you don't mind?
So Wikipedia's got 1 out of 3 things there. Absolutely spot on. Well done. And that is that, yes, Sherry Blair is my half sister. We grew up in different households, as my father had many different wives. So we weren't brought up together, but yes, we are related by the blood of my father. She grew up in Liverpool in a very Catholic household. I grew up in a non-religious household in North London, with my father a lapsed Catholic, someone who had given up on Catholicism, but still who would occasionally sing really quite fighting, aggressive songs to God. God is drawing his sword, I'm fighting for the Lord. Occasionally these things would rise up. And really, interestingly, I suppose, if we're talking about what shapes my early faith, was the link to God and a fight for justice. And growing up in a socialist household where is the working man and his family being looked after before yourself. If you're educated, you have a duty to other people to either educate them or to help them in any way you can. The duty has never been to the self. So I guess that is also a path to Islam.
Now, you mentioned in a piece you wrote, I wonder whether it was a piece you wrote or an interview you gave in the press, but there are all sorts of bits and pieces of it across the internet, that there were a number of stereotypes that through this journey you discovered the reverse of what people generally perceive Islam and Muslim people to be. And you refer in particular to Muslim women, because you had an encounter with Muslim women during the visits you made over the past 5 or 6 years to the region.
Yeah, I think again that my journey begins and probably ends via Mecca in Palestine. Going to the West Bank, and I went on a tour with a European women's congregation around the West Bank, and meeting Palestinian representatives of parliament there, representatives of all the parties there, and hearing them speak strongly on political issues, seeing them active in all tiers of life, teachers, lecturers, medicine. This was not a community that was having, in which their Islam was an imposition on them. This is the West Bank in 2005. And so just knowing that these women existed and were married to Muslim men, and that all Muslim men weren't people who'd been painted in the West who were going to beat their wives and were somehow subjugating them. And then, of course, the image of the veil. What does it mean? I think that preconception was actually lifted when I spent some time in Lebanon with young women who were studying the media and academic sciences, professional industries at Beirut University. They were also supporters of Hezbollah. But these women were by no means subjugated by any men. They were some of the brightest, most academic, most free and liberated women with a dignified exterior and a dignified way of life that I've ever met. spending 5 days travelling with these women around Beirut after Beirut had been smashed by Israel really woke me up to the fact that I had hijab envy.
Usually in the West, there's a general misconception that religious women in the Arab or Muslim world are not religious by free choice.
And this I rebel against now. I really, you know, I began speaking about this before. I was a Muslim woman myself, and now I feel in an absolute duty. I'm being guided to speak strongly about this. There aren't 750 million stupid Muslim women in the world who just are forced into this. There are 750 million Muslim women in the world, most of whom are driven by an intense desire to please Allah, who feel free in their religion. There are those who are not, and we discuss those a lot in the West. Let us, within Islam, give the rights of the women to choose freely their hijab and their faith a better face and more airtime.
Now, once a person has reverted to Islam or converted to Islam, whichever term people prefer to use, there are sometimes social difficulties. What about in your case? The people you immediately deal with, your immediate family, has this shocked them in any way, or has it surprised them, and as a result they've been acting differently?
Well, let's talk about the people closest to me. I have two wonderful daughters called Alexandra and Holly, who are 10 and 7 years old. And my mother, of course, who I'm close to, and my younger sister, who is pregnant with her first child. And all of these very close relatives have had me lecturing them about Palestine, first of all, for 5 years, and then gradually saying to them, did you know this about women in the hijab? Did you know this about Islam? And again, even though I didn't know I was on the road to Islam, when I said I'd converted, they all went, well, of course you have. We knew you were going to do that. How did they know? I didn't know. I was quite angry. How did you know? Well, you've talked about it. All of these things, you know, there's a dialogue that, you know,
it was spontaneous.
Yes, it was spontaneous. So my mother, suspicious of the scarf, worried about what would be expected about me, but seeing my behaviour and how much more loving I am towards her, sending flowers and chocolates and remembering her each week, and she's like, I think she might revert if I carry on being such a good daughter. And my own daughters, my 7-year-old Holly, who prays with me in the morning at Fajr, without being asked. I'm very new to this, to ask anybody to join Islam. It's not in me to do that. You can only be a good example, I think, as a mother.
Well, actually, this is the secret. The best way to convey Islam is by example. And I've been arguing for this idea actually for a while, that in my opinion, Islam did not spread because people kept saying, become a Muslim or you go to hellfire. Rather, people saw a good example. I mean, like my ancestors in Palestine who were Christian, they saw Muslim conquerors as liberators from the Byzantine persecutors. And that was opening the door for them to become Muslim.
You've touched on something really interesting there. The idea of Islam liberating us as Westerners and Western women from the shackles of self-obsession, of weakness, of the ego, of really sensualizing ourselves in every moment of our day to please men that we don't even know. I mean, I feel liberated by that. And I'm meeting very many young Muslim women, a lot of whom, some have reverted at like 15 years old, 10, 11 years old, 20 years old, who've been living, going to universities and schools in London and around England and gone, I don't like this, I want to be liberated, and being liberated into Islam. This is a lovely thing to explore.
But until now, we don't have a proper study or an established statistic of how many people have accepted Islam or reverted to Islam. But we hear that the number is on the rise, and that it is in all strata of society.
Do you know, I'll tell you what, I've only been a Muslim for 9 weeks now. Can you believe it? It does feel longer, which shows it's been in me. I already have met proof that Islam is the fastest growing religion. It must be in the world. I mean, young women of all tiers of society in the UK are taking risks with their with being ignored by their own society, with all of the changes that they must make in order to be greeted into Islam. It's very interesting.
And imagine that this is happening despite all the onslaught on Islam and the Muslims, and all the attempts to vilify it and to present it in a manner that intimidates people or frightens them away from it.
Look, Allah is the best planner. And we know this, and so whatever we think that mankind's machinations are at the moment to destroy Islam, it can't happen. But most of all, when curiosity about this religion is piqued, and people go to a masjid or they read the Quran, we know that they can't help but be touched by it. This is the experience of the imams who are guiding people every week and every month in London to Allah.
Now, your reversion has been responded to by certain columnists in the British media with sarcasm, with all sorts of negative responses. Here in the West, people usually herald the banner of freedom of choice. And when people convert to other denominations, other religions, whether it is Hinduism or Buddhism or whatever, we don't hear an uproar. Yet when it comes to Islam, and especially when somebody who is well known in the public sphere here converts to Islam, we get that sort of reaction.
Now here's what's interesting. Right now, if you go to any bookstore in the United Kingdom, you will find thousands of books dedicated to what we call self-help. These are loosely termed spiritual attempts to rise us out of something, a society that we know is corrupted from inside and making us unhappy with its lack of guidance, okay? So you have books like Conversations with God, a book by a man in America who claimed to have conversations with God. In it, a lot of what he says, for example, is about the ability to have a direct contact with God, which is what Muslims do every day. You have something called the Celestine Prophecy. This has been the bestseller for almost, I think, 12, 15 years in the UK. And in the US, again, self-help, about finding knowledge. It calls coincidences getting you closer to God. Well, we know that Allah guides you when you're on the right path. It talks about a connection with nature. Again, we're allowed to grasp at kind of non-specific ideas of spirituality, but Islam is allowed to be frightening, and yet they all lead to Islam. So I think the media is fighting a false war against spirituality.
Now, what are you doing now at the moment in order to learn more about Islam, in order to take your position within the Ummah, if I may say so?
Well, I am reading the Quran most nights, just a few pages at a time, just before I go to sleep, quietly, and saying the words out loud so that they stick with me. I'm reading books that are passed to me. If people pass me a book, I will try to read it, because I don't have any specific direction at the moment, and I need to be open to many different areas. But really, I have to get to grips with the basic tenets before I can move off into the... what's really interesting is the academic side of Islam. You're expected to be learned, and that's different from other religions.
Because if you don't have the knowledge, you cannot practice.
That's right.
You won't be able to know what is expected of you.
So I go to different masjids on Saturdays, and I go to conferences to listen and learn, and then I go away and I read, and that's all I can do.
Now, I found also a phrase that you mentioned, I think, in one of the articles about the sheikh with whom under whose supervision you converted or reverted, and he asked you to take it easy. Not to rush into things and to be sure about what you are doing. Is that what you're doing at the moment?
I think everybody's saying, take it easy, take it easy. Don't try and be the perfect Muslim today, because actually none of us ever quite reach that. So you're allowed to make stumbles.
We try, we strive.
Try, inshallah. So take it easy, because otherwise Islam is about, this is what people tell me, it's how I'm being guided. Islam is about improving your life, making your life calmer, making it nice. Allah wants you to be happy. He doesn't want you to strive to put yourself in a box and lock yourself away and be unhappy. So find a happy path and take things as they come, but always with the intention of being a better Muslim.
Have you, before you took the decision, or before you had that spiritual experience in Iran, have you read biographies of people who went through a similar journey?
But I have the most amazing book given to me now. Again, I said I'm open to getting these books. It's called The Road to Mecca.
Ah, that's a wonderful book.
One of the most great books. Can I please ask everybody to buy it?
Yes.
It was written by an Austrian Jewish journalist who travelled Arabia, Palestine, Iraq, 1920s. And he's asked, one of the moments in it that really struck me was he was asked, he travels by dromedary, of course, in the middle of nowhere.
Of course, that's Muhammad Asad.
Yes.
Whose pre-Islamic name was Leopold Weiss. Yes.
And he is asked by one of his friends, he says, how did you come, dear uncle, to find Islam? He said, first I fell in love with the Arab people, and then I fell in love with Islam. And isn't that funny? I thought that could be written by me. I fell in love with the Palestinian people, and that led me to Islam.
By the way, that biography by Muhammad Asad, The Road to Mecca, has had a great impact not only on people who made the journey recently, but even on people who were born as Muslim and read the book. It's a fascinating book.
It really is beautiful because you know the essence, because I often feel reading it that if you change the name and put Lauren Booth there, the same morals, the same beauty, the same simple kindness of the people in that part of the world is Allah's work on earth through their practice. And I think that immortalness 100 years later is incredible.
Are we to expect you to write your own biography?
If I'm asked to or guided to, then and the story is interesting to enough people, then I hope.
I think it would interest many people because it's each person has his or her own unique story to tell. And their own unique experience, and I think people benefit from it. Imagine if Muhammad Asad did not write that book.
You know, it's so moving to me, and you're right. It's one of the great books, I think, one of the great contributions to why people's hearts changed. And the way he summarizes as well, just quickly, how the West wants to see the Arab world and wants to criminalize the Muslim world. This was 90 years ago. I'm so ashamed of what Britain did. Sometimes I cry when I'm reading it on the train. We've been such double dealers in that part of the world for so many hundreds of years. It's hideous, but the way it summarizes what's still going on in Iraq today is fascinating.
And finally, Lauren, how about the Muslim community here in Britain? Of course, you announced your conversion to Islam publicly. But how has this been received generally?
You know, I made the announcement at the Global Peace and Unity event just because I was asked, and it felt like the right thing to do. So I did that, and I'm glad I did it because it allowed the Muslim Ummah to come and stand with me as I make that change, and I've been very lucky with that. And it's also helped me to be guided into talking to women in the hijab who say, you've helped us go to school today. You've made us really proud of the scarf today on the underground. Oh wow, how amazing. I'm making people happy just by getting out of bed. What could be better, mashallah. and so I seek to be a part of the sisterhood and represent them well.
Lauren, you're most welcome to Islam, and may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala provide you with the strength and the knowledge, and may also your reversion to Islam be an example for many others in Britain and probably around the world.
Inshallah.
ونشكركم على متابعة هذه الحلقة، ونأمل أن نلتقيكم في مرة قادمة إن شاء الله.